What if I told you that one of the most bedrock institutions in our society, the public school system, isn't a pillar of democracy, but maybe, just maybe, a fundamental threat to individual liberty? We're about to dive into a powerful and, for a lot of people, a really radical argument that challenges pretty much everything we've been taught to believe about education. So let's just jump right into the deep end with this really provocative question. From this point of view, compulsory schooling isn't just a flawed system, it's literally a form of imprisonment. I mean, think about it. It's a huge system that forces millions of kids, many of whom have absolutely no desire to be there, into this very rigid structure, a place where teachers and administrators, even with the best intentions, basically become their guards for 6 to 8 hours a day. And this quote from the writer Isabel Patterson, wow, it really gets to the heart of this entire argument. The idea is that when the state gets to control what children are taught and how they're taught, it gains this almost unbreakable power over the minds of its citizens, right from the very beginning. Now, that's a huge claim, so let's break down exactly how this argument gets built piece by piece. So here's our roadmap for today. First, we're going to take a really hard look at that classic schoolhouse ideal we all know. Then, we're going to travel back in time and ask if schools were actually designed for control from the get-go. After that, we'll follow the money and uncover the real price of so-called free education. We'll explore the constant tug-of-war between choice and conformity, and finally, we'll get to the radical solution that's proposed to fix the whole thing. All right, let's get into our first big idea by challenging an assumption most of us never even think about. This whole critique really hangs on one powerful distinction, the idea that we've made a huge mistake by confusing education with schooling. They are not the same thing, and getting that difference is the key to everything else we're going to talk about. So this system of compulsory attendance, it's not seen as a gift. It's seen as a form of involuntary servitude. It essentially creates, in this view, a prison system for the nation's youth. So is it really any wonder that we see so much discontent, alienation, and even rebellion among young people? The argument is that this isn't a bug in the system. It's the predictable result of forcing millions of unique individuals into a one-size-fits-all box that many of them just don't fit into. And I love how this slide breaks it down, because this gets to the absolute core of it. You see, education is this amazing, natural, lifelong thing. You're being educated right now, listening to this. You're educated when you learn a new recipe, fix something in your house, or just have a deep conversation with a friend. Schooling, on the other hand, is just one very specific, very artificial slice of that bigger picture. The argument here is that forcing every single kid, the future artist, the future mechanic, the future coder, down that one single narrow path is a tragic waste of their potential. Many would be so much happier and more productive learning a trade or starting a business than just sitting in a classroom. Okay, so if the main goal wasn't just pure education, then what was it? Well, let's dig into the history. This perspective claims that from the very beginning, state-run schooling was a lot less about enlightenment and a lot more about instilling obedience and creating a citizen that fits a very specific mold. And this idea goes back centuries. Martin Luther, one of the most influential figures of the last 1,000 years, was a huge proponent of compulsory state education. But his goal wasn't just to teach people to read. He explicitly saw state schools as a weapon in an ideological war against his enemies, the devil, the pope, you name it. And his justification was chillingly direct. If the state can draft young men for war, he argued, it absolutely has the right to draft children for school. And this timeline really shows you the pattern. It starts with the Puritans in Massachusetts, who created America's first compulsory system to build what they saw as a perfect theocracy. Fast forward to the 19th century, and you have reformers who openly talked about using schools to mold the waves of Catholic immigrants into a more Protestant Anglo-Saxon ideal. And then you get this truly dark example from the 1920s, where the KKK led a movement in Oregon to actually outlaw private schools, specifically to crush the Catholic school system. You see the thread here, right? Over and over again, the stated goal is to stamp out diversity and create one single, obedient, patterned citizen. Okay, so we've looked at the historical argument for control. Now let's follow the money and look at the economic side of things. Because from this perspective, that phrase free public education is hiding a deeply unfair system of forced financial payments. Right, so the main point here is that public school isn't free. It's not even close. It's funded by what this argument calls a complex web of coerced subsidies. Think about it. Parents who choose private or religious schools have to pay twice, once in taxes for a system they don't even use, and then again for the one they actually want. People without children are forced to pay for other people's kids. But here's the real twist, the part that flips the usual story on its head. This argument says that the system often forces poor people to subsidize the education of the wealthy. Let me show you what that looks like. This data from a California study just makes the point so clearly. Look at these two bars. At the time of the study, the average income for families who actually had kids in the state's public university system was $12,000. But the average income for the rest of the families in the state, the ones without kids in that system, was much lower, about $7,900. Since everyone pays the taxes that fund those universities, you end up with a situation where, on average, lower and middle-income families are helping to pay for the college education of wealthier families' children. It's a direct transfer of wealth from the less well-off to the more well-off. The critique goes even deeper, looking at the actual structure of these institutions. On one side, you have the trustee-run nonprofits, which is what most of higher ed is. Without a profit motive, the argument goes, they become inefficient and they're less responsive to the students, their actual customers. Then you have the for-profit or proprietary colleges. They have a massive incentive to be efficient and serve their students well, because if they don't, they go out of business. Yet, this model is systematically held back by tax laws and accreditation rules that protect the old system. By the way, if you're getting something out of this kind of detailed breakdown, hitting that subscribe button is the easiest way to make sure you catch our next explainer. So, we've seen the economic problems, but all of this creates a huge social problem too. Why is it that a government monopoly on education seems to always lead to these endless social conflicts and a total lack of diversity? Let's unpack that. Well, it's just the nature of a government bureaucracy. It has to create uniform rules for everybody. If it started making exceptions, it'd get accused of favoritism and special treatment. So it's forced to impose a one-size-fits-all model. It's like trying to make every single person in the country wear the exact same size shoe. And for something as deeply personal as education, that uniformity becomes an intense battleground. Whatever the state decides to teach, a huge number of parents are automatically left out, forced into a system they fundamentally disagree with. And that leads to these endless, bitter political fights to gain control of the machine. To really get your head around the alternative, just think about the magazine aisle in a bookstore. It's a perfect real-world example of what a free market in ideas and information looks like. You've got publications for every possible taste and political view imaginable: conservative, liberal, socialist, magazines about chess, about gardening, about science. The diversity is just incredible. And the key is, nobody is forced to read a magazine they don't like, and even the most niche interests can find a voice. Now imagine if the government decided to ban all of those and create one single compulsory state-run magazine that every single person was forced to read. Think of the ferocious battles. Who would be the editor? What goes on the cover? Is it going to be liberal or conservative? The political war would be absolutely nonstop, and no matter what they decided, millions of people would be furious. Well, this argument says that's a perfect picture of what we've created with the public school system. Okay, so we've walked through the historical, economic, and social problems. Now we finally get to the solution, and it is about as direct and as radical as it gets. The prescription is a very clear three-step process. Step 1, end compulsory attendance laws. Stop treating schools like prisons for kids. Step 2, abolish the public school system itself. Get rid of the massive tax burden and the unfair subsidies. And then Step 3, allow a truly free market in education to flourish, letting parents and students, not bureaucrats, decide what is best for them. And the vision for what comes next is a complete reversal of every single problem we've talked about. The school's role as a prison? Gone. The heavy tax burden? Lifted. In its place, you'd see an incredible range of choices prop up, just like that magazine market. Those unjust subsidies would disappear. And state indoctrination would be replaced by genuine, voluntary learning that's actually tailored to the individual. And so this whole argument leaves us with a final, really powerful question that reframes the entire debate. It asks us to stop thinking of education as this one-size-fits-all government service and start seeing it as a deeply personal choice. In a world of total educational freedom, what would you choose? What kind of learning would you want for yourself or for your kids? It's a huge question, and it challenges one of our most basic assumptions about how society should work. I'm really curious to see what you think about this one in the comments. And if you enjoyed wrestling with big ideas like this, make sure you're subscribed with those notifications on, because this is what we do here. Thanks for watching.